Back in 2018, Lian Li released a case called the O11 Dynamic that they developed in collaboration with their Bauer. It became a very popular case. It was notable for quite a few different reasons. It had a different layout, it had a lot more radiator support, and it gave you a really nice look at the internals of the system. Today, Lian Li is releasing the O11 EVO, which is the evolution of the O11 Dynamic. And rather than just making the case in a few different colors or doing a few tweaks here and there, they've really revamped the capabilities, and they have actually added a ton of new functionality and features to the O11 EVO. So today I'm gonna go back to my roots, give you guys sort of a case overview to show some of the features like the ability to do an inverted layout or do a vertical GPU mount. And if you think you know what I'm talking about when I say vertical GPU mount, maybe you don't quite yet. And yes, I do have a build planned for this case. It's gonna be all white and it's gonna be pristine and beautiful, but all the parts aren't here yet. So today, we're just gonna focus on the case itself.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by MSI Z690 motherboards built for 12th generation Intel Core processors. Whether you prefer the blacked out look of the MEG Z690 Unify, the dazzling RGB capabilities of the MPG Z690 Carbon Wi-Fi, or the well-balanced form and function provided by the MAG Z690 Tomahawk Wi-Fi, every board is packed with features like 2.5 gig LAN, 20 gigabit USB 3.2, up to 5 M.2 NVMe SSD slots, premium VRM cooling, and of course, PCI Express Gen 5 support, as well as Wi-Fi 6E and DDR5 memory slots on specified models. Click the sponsor link in the description for more on the Z690 motherboard lineup from MSI. Well, Lian Li certainly packed this case sample quite well, which I appreciate. Kept this internal box very pristine. Now we can pop this open and get a first look. Right on top, we've got an accessory kit, so we'll be going through that momentarily. Additional protective foam, and we will do the classic flip over to remove action with this guy. Of course, my recommended means of getting a case out of the box. You flip it, shimmy it up like that. Prepare yourself for static electric shock. Oh, actually didn't really do it. Must be a special feature of this case. All right, this case is available, at launch at least, in a couple different colors, black and white. I have the white version here. This is like a snow white version. If you're familiar with some of the other O11 Dynamic Mini and the Big Daddy one, whichever one that one's called, they have a few different color schemes. There is a black version. There is a white version that also still has some black and silver, and then they have sort of a snow white version, which is what this is. The black elements, like the grommet pass-throughs and everything on this, are kind of a grayish rather than still being black. And this is very suitable for the type of build that I will be assembling, which is going to be all white, pristine, featuring stuff like Corsair's Dominator Platinum RGB DDR5 kit in white, which I feel very special that I have. These also were just became available. Now here we go. A first look at this case, and isn't it pretty? So some of the things right off the bat that they have been working on is mesh panels, and mesh panels are available. Well, they come pre-installed on the rear side here and the top, and accessible with just a couple thumb screws to remove them. And this is one of the things I think Lian Li has done really well with the O11 series in general, is lots of modularity, and lots of modularity accessible via just some thumb screws that are also captive thumb screws. I have captive thumb screw shirts available at paulshardware.net if you're interested. And apart from the existing features of the O11 series that you might already be familiar with, like big tempered glass panels that give you a really nice look at the interior of the case, one in the front here that obviously doesn't provide any airflow, but it's sort of supplemented by the fact that there is a side panel airflow right here, as well as intake at the bottom. And then you have exhaust at the top, as well as more exhaust coming through the back here. It's also a dual chamber design, which means most of your components go in this space right here, but there's also a pretty wide secondary chamber here that houses your power supply, a lot of the cable management. This also gives you access to stuff like drive bays, which I've always appreciated having external access to that for upgrades, or you can even set up a hot swap or something like that if you really wanted to. But I'd like to focus on the upgrades that Lian Li has made for this newest generation of this case. There are some that are simpler, like the fact that you can pop these side panels off without removing the top piece now. And that's just an ease of access sort of thing. And if you're concerned about these popping off during shipping, if you're a system builder or something like that, there's a spot here at the top where you can secure it with a screw. So you're probably going to want to do that if you're going to ship or move the system after you've assembled a PC inside. But the three big upgrades for the O11 EVO that stood out to me are the fact that you can basically flip the entire frame inside here and do a reverse build, which actually is how I'm planning to build my system once I do the assembly, which should be coming at you next week. The front panel I/O here, which is a USB Type-C, a couple USB 3.0, and a headphone jack, can actually be repositioned to be on this side, depending on how you have the case oriented, or with an upgrade kit, you can actually reposition it right up here on the top. And then there's the vertical GPU mount option. And yes, there is sort of the standard vertical GPU mount option that you can do with this case where it's situated kind of like this, and there is an add-on bracket for that. But you can actually do a vertical GPU mount over here. And I have no idea, by the way, if the 3090 Founders Edition will fit. This just happens to be the closest GPU on hand that I could grab. But you can put a GPU right here, which is kind of crazy, something I'd never seen before. It's done by way of taking your riser cable and just sort of feeding it across here, which, by the way, and this is Joe's idea, Lian Lee, you should make a strimer version of the PCIe extender cable so we can have a ribbon with RGB LEDs on that. But if you combine mounting the GPU right here with the mesh front panel upgrade, then you can have very fresh air flowing directly to your GPU, which for some graphics cards that run a little hot, and who knows what's going to happen when maybe the 40 series comes out in 2022, is, at least according to Lian Lee, a very excellent thermal solution for a GPU and keeps the temperatures nice and cool. I have popped open the accessories just to give you guys a quick rundown of that. There's a box, that's a supplemental sheet for the manual. There's a manual included, which I've been referencing heavily because this case has a lot going on, honestly. We have two baggies. This one has the screws and whatnot for mounting stuff, SSDs, hard drives. You got some zip ties in there. I do appreciate that all of these screws are individually bagged up rather than just being all shoved in the same little Ziploc. And then this bag has your Lian Bauer badge, which doesn't come pre-installed in the case this time around in case you didn't want that, but they do still provide it, so you can pop that on there. Show Der Bauer your love for his and the community's work, apparently, in developing this case, because there was a lot of community feedback for certain things. Other random accessories, though, like a little block of rubber for, I actually don't know what the block of rubber is for, but extra accessories and some Velcro. And then there's this, which is an additional 2.5-inch / 3.5-inch drive mounting piece. And basically that can go right here where this radiator bracket is, and it comes with two rails that help you mount that as well. So if you wanted to set this case up with lots of storage, you can, or you can go for lots of radiator space or space for fans and cooling. I do have some more sold separately accessories here, either that or that's a kilo of cocaine or something like that, but I'll open that up in just a second. Here's a quick look inside the case. Like I said, beautiful finish, very nice white paint on here, and these grommets are a nice sort of a slightly contrasted gray color, but still blends in very nicely with the overall snow white theme of the case. For radiators or fans, all these little panels are like removable, which is extremely helpful, especially if you're setting up radiators in particular. This one just has a single thumb screw, which pop off, and then you can pull that out to get yourself set up. And then you might notice that even with that removed, there's still two layers here, and that's because there is sort of a base layer that has the feet on it, and then there's the frame of the case that sits on top of it, and you remove the feet and flip the case over and put the feet on the top and put the top piece on the bottom if you want to do the reverse orientation, and I'll show you guys how to do that in just a minute. Just other little attention to detail things, though, that I really appreciate, like the fact that they went with some nice silver finish, clean looking thumb screws for basically all of the expansion panels there, as well as any of these captive thumb screw areas that you'll be removing to remove the panels, top, bottom, wherever they might happen to be. I guess they're not all captive. That one slipped out, but it's okay. Sometimes captive thumb screws make a daring escape. Like I said, though, that front I/O panel can be removed and relocated, and here is one of the location points for that. That's actually where it would feed through, but Lian Li is selling a separate piece here that you would need to buy just to replace this to provide you the actual holes there. And they could have gone two ways with that. They could have included the holes here, just with a cover on it or something like that, but it would have been not as clean of a look on the top when you weren't using that I/O. Or they could have done what they decided to do and just sell that panel separately, and there are pros or cons either way, but that's what they decided to do. And then for this side panel here, this one's actually a little bit loose, but I was told by Lian Li that that is a known issue with some of these first samples that they sent out. What they're actually gonna be doing with the finished version of the case is they're gonna add some magnets, and that'll be just to hold these side panels on a little bit more securely, but honestly for right now, now. It's been totally fine. So here's the business end of the case where your probably uglier parts of the build are going to fit, such as cable management and stuff. This vertical piece here is similar to the original O11 Dynamic. It can house a couple 2.5-inch drives that you can mount to that. Looks like they've kind of flipped it around a little bit so you can do the mounting and the cable management a little bit easier. So I appreciate that. And removing that will give you access to the main cable management area right here where they have already tucked in and tied down with some of these pre-installed Velcro straps. Just some of the main cables that come pre-installed with the case, like the connector for your USB 3.2 Gen 2. This is also where your power supply will mount, and there's a little bracket right here that supports it. When we flip the case, we're going to remove a lot of these elements and reposition them on the other side, so stay tuned for that. And you can position the power supply right here in the lower spot, or you can swap it with this 3.5-inch hard drive bay and move it up here. And you can also, of course, do either of those setups for flipping the case over as well. The hard drive cage here is still black, and that and some of the cables are the only black elements that are still in the case apart from all the other snow white colored pieces. But honestly, all this stuff is going to be tucked back behind the rear side panel, so not a huge deal in terms of aesthetics. Finally, there's a vertical mount here for radiators or fans, and that is one of the sort of big features of the original O11 Dynamic, was utilizing this side of the case for air intake, where lots of cases in the past hadn't really done that. Many cases have copied this layout, which is fine. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery after all. But like I said, you can swap this bracket in there if you are doing fewer fans, fewer radiators, if you're not doing as much of a water-cooled build and you're more focused on storage. But even if you're not focused on storage, you still got a couple 2.5-inch drive mounts right there. A couple 3.5-inch drives can fit in the cage, so there's still plenty there. It's just if you want to max stuff out. It's nice that they included that bracket too. I already kind of showed you the front I/O, and it comes pre-installed here on the front of the case, and I'm going to be moving that in just a second. That's actually a combo jack mic headphone, USB 3.0, USB 3.2 Gen 2, and a Type-C connector. And then right here you have your power button, and this is unique in that you can actually push it both ways. You can press power from the front right there, or press power from the side right there. Just kind of a unique little wraparound feature. And then this is an integrated RGB controller. You can do different modes or swap between colors right there. There's 8 different modes. One of them is just syncing with your motherboard. That's an option. And in terms of addressable RGBs, this controller can support up to 56 individual LEDs. In this box, I am told we have accessories. Blank piece of paper. So this is actually the upright GPU kit, O11DE-2W white, the white version. So this will be sold separately, but this is so we can do that kind of crazy vertical mount. And this includes a PCIe riser cable, and oh my gosh, Lian Li, talk about attention to detail. And this is actually very nice. Like I said, the only thing, Lian Li, I feel like you could do to improve this, a streamer version, as you guys like to call it, with some RGB LEDs, of course, would be super nice. I just double checked and confirmed this is a PCI Express 4.0 compatible riser cable. And this kit is called Upright GPU Mounting Kit. And then there's a vertical GPU mounting kit. This kit is going to cost you $90 as an add-on with the bracket and everything. The vertical mounting kit is going to cost you $70 as an add-on. The replacement top I/O piece right here is only $13, so that's not too much. And then you can get additional front panel I/O connector kits if you want to, and those are $20 each. Because there's multiple places to position those, you could of course get another one, plug it into the motherboard as long as your motherboard has the appropriate headers for it, and give yourself more front I/O. Actually, correction, this kit is $19, $18.99, and then the front mesh panel replacement is $20. So here's a quick demo of repositioning that I/O panel. Basically, there's just a little clip here that you release, slide it up a little bit, and it pops off. It's just held in place by those little brackets on the bottom. And then there is a little piece right here, which is a retention bracket that you can unscrew a screw for, so you can reposition it in order to position it differently. So you might note that it's kind of angled on either side, and that's so it can sit kind of flush with the feet. Snap it in right there. And now you have I/O on the side if that's more accessible for you. At the bottom of the case, of course. I didn't route these cables here, but you can actually use the same mounting point for that little retention bracket for that position. And then you can also move it back all the way over here. I'm gonna flip the whole case upside. There we go. Because like I mentioned, you can completely flip the orientation of this case, and in that case you might want the I/O panel on that side. There's actually a pretty decent amount of cable length on these as well. It's all just kind of tied up right here because like I showed you, they pre-cable manage some of this stuff. By loosening those, you can feed a little bit more out, so you can get these cables positioned where you want them on the underside of the case. There's also a magnetic dust filter down here that you might be noticing. It's just held in place by the magnets. And as with any case's cable management, you might have to finagle these around a little bit to get them oriented properly to your liking, but once you do that, just reinstall that little bracket and it holds it in place. Now, I'm gonna need to remove this in a second when I do the flip case thing, but for now, those are the 3 bottom locations that you can install that I/O panel to. But like I said, you can purchase additional ones of these. They're $18.99 according to the Lian Lee documentation that they sent over, and that would potentially allow you to add one to that top spot as well, although you'd also need to get that replacement top bracket in order to do that. For my next demonstration, we're going to take the upright GPU kit here and do a quick installation of that. I say quick installation. There are a few steps that need to be gone through, need to be handled in order to do this, but I'll show you guys how it works. First off, I've realized that they actually want you to use this as well for this installation. So this is not just for supplemental 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch drives. You also would use this if you want to go with the upright GPU mount as well. But one other cool thing that I just discovered is this little screw that sticks out right there is actually a release. So you just lift that up and then this bracket slides out just like that. That's super simple. I really appreciate that. I do want to point out, we did have one loose screw from shipping though, so I'm going to reattach that right now in case anyone else encounters this. Little plastic nub and just a little standard screw. That's where it came from. Now we should be able to take this bracket and install it right there, kind of in the same way. That's very satisfying. Very easy removal of that panel. Actually a lot easier than I was expecting. Next we have this piece, and this is actually 2 pieces that are screwed together, but they come pre-attached so you kind of know the orientation it should be in. You might recognize these as your I/O, where your I/O goes for a graphics card. You've also got the little slots here for the, I don't know what to call those, the little end pieces of the graphics card bracket. Slots in there, and then it secures on that end with the screws. But we're going to start out by removing these 2 screws so we can separate these 2 pieces. There we go. So this piece you're going to directly mount to your graphics card. This piece you're going to mount to the case to hold that graphics card once you install it. I removed the top panel here so we can access the mounting points for this bracket. There are just 4 screws to screw in, positioning it right here. And since the GPU is going to be kind of hanging from this bracket, there are 4 screws to mount that, which holds it quite securely once it's installed. Next up, we're going to take our graphics card, and this, like I said, is an RTX 3090, which I wasn't sure would fit, but it seems like from the Lian Lee documentation, they did design this in order to fit this graphics card, and I'll confirm that for you guys in just a second. Now do note that if you go with this orientation, your video outs on your graphics card are going to be kind of blocked, so they recommend installing this bracket and then plugging in your HDMI cable so you can route it back through the case along with all the rest of your cable management. I'm not going to be doing that today, but just bear that in mind if you're using this video to guide you through this assembly, that you probably will want to do that. So there, I showed installing this GPU right here, at least sliding it into the bracket and securing it with these 2 screws. However, I did this in the wrong order, because before you go that far, you'll want to install the support bracket down there at the bottom, and that is this piece right here. This piece, there's also different ways that you can set it up and everything, but basically it's going to mount to this rear bracket right here. It's got different holes, so you can shift it this way or this way depending on the Z height, I guess, of your graphics card. And you can also position it further up or down, again, depending on the length of your card. And then also you can move it up and down vertically depending on the length of your card. Also, if you're water cooling and you're going to end up with a single slot or a 2-slot solution, you're going to want to position that further away from this rear panel. So for that purpose, they recommend installing on these 2 slots on the bracket rather than using all 3. But of course, if you're using an air-cooled card like this one, especially a 3-slot one, then you're going to take up all of that space. So we're going to set up this bracket for a 3-slot cooler. If you wanted to do a 2-slot one, you just rotate it around like that. And then there's rubber pads that it ships with. And you're going to want to put the pad on this little bracket in the proper orientation. So again, if it was a single or 2-slot solution, I would put the pad on that side right there. For our purposes, we're going to rotate that around like that, and we're going to put the pad right here. So I popped the card back in just so I can make sure I'm installing this bracket in a reasonable position. It's going to be down here, and that pad on that side is going to sort of hug the card from the back, and then we'll put another one on the front here to hug it from the front, and probably right down about here. I don't know, I guess you could position it where you're not going to cover up the glowing GeForce RTX logo if you really prefer that. So I got the bracket pretty much mounted right here, and this part I will say is, you know, it's a little finicky. You got to sort of wiggle it around and position it, and Lian Li has gone with a lot of options here that allow for flexibility. Like, you can even bend this bracket a little bit if you want. There's lots of slotted screw holes, so you can sort of position it a little bit higher, a little bit lower, which means you got to kind of hold it in place in order to get it mounted properly. But that's just because they wanted to make sure they could fit a wide range of graphics cards of different shapes and sizes in this, as well as water cooling support, as well as having space for stuff like you know, your power connectors are going to be coming out of this side with this particular setup, so you might have different solutions for how you want to wire that up. That said though, I've pretty much got this in place, so I think I can pop the graphics card back in. But like I said, if you need to position this differently to shift it up and down, all you're going to want to do is loosen those screws just a little bit so you can slide it to where you want it to go and get the graphics card secured in there. Here's our riser cable, has a little protective cover on it, and I'm just doing a demo here, but I kind of want to do it the same way that you would want to if you were actually building a system in this orientation. So I'm going to connect the riser cable like that. We will then slide the graphics card back into that bracket like I already did a couple times, but hopefully for realsies this time. 2 screws at the top to hold that in place. I intentionally left the power connector for the RTX 3090 plugged in just so you can kind of see. It's not like there's a ton of space here, but it's enough to route those cable connectors down, and then you can plug in the connectors down here. Of course, depending on what front panel you're going with, that may or may not give you an aesthetically pleasing finished product, but also note that the GPU it's floating a little bit right now, so that's what we're gonna do to secure it in place, is use one more of these brackets. Adhesive goes, there's a little protective rubber pad goes right there. Screw to hold it in place goes right. Turned it back, okay. And leaving it just loose enough so I have a little bit of wiggle room. You can kind of compress the graphics card a little bit. Like I said, just give a little hug, a little GPU hug there. Tighten that down. And then that's held fairly securely in position. And like I said, it does seem, well, I guess I can pretty much confirm now that the RTX 3090 does fit in that slot. From there, you would, I mean, presuming you had a motherboard installed, you would route this over to there like so, and you can, of course, tie these up. Lian Li shows these cable managed with some zip ties and stuff like that. I'm not going to do that right now, but just to sort of give you an idea. Like I said though, come on Lian Li, give us a strimer version of this. That'd be pretty badass. And then it would plug into your motherboard over there. Now if I pop on our front panel, and this is the glass, I don't have the mesh one here, you might notice a couple things. One, very nice view of your graphics card right there front and center in the case. And again, depending on the orientation, the graphics card you're using, whether or not it lights up, this may or may not be a good solution for you. If I'm going to be a little critical here, I'd say this bracket that's holding it in place, not the most aesthetically pleasing, being right there front and center. But like I said, there is the option to put a mesh panel up here, which is going to provide you a ton of airflow that's going to hit that graphics card immediately before being contaminated by any of the other heat generating components of the case. So that would be a benefit. Just bear in mind that if you have fans mounted here, you might want to pay attention to, again, the Z height, the vertical height, the thickness that way of your graphics card. The 3090 is pretty tall and it sticks out a good inch plus on top of the bracket right there. Getting a thinner card or just one that's a little bit smaller, like a 3080 or one of the other different designs, might give you a little bit more wiggle room with front panel fans right there. And if you're curious, go to the Lian Li website where they have all the specs for this case, because they've done a pretty thorough job of indicating which your dimensions of the graphics card will be compatible with the front mesh panel and the fan intakes and a standard 25mm thick 120mm fan. And now it is time to invert this case, which I've never done before. So for beginners, we have removed pretty much all of the brackets, the side panels, tempered glass on the front and the side, rear side panel, these fan mounting / radiator mounting brackets as well. The bottom one, you just have a single thumb screw to remove. The top one has 2 regular screws here. And then that just slides back a little bit and pops out as well. So again, just one of the nice features of this case, especially if you're doing water cooling setups. The most recent build that I did on the Lian case was in the O11 Mini, and I used the removable brackets on that one, as well as the Lian Uni fans that snap together, which greatly improves the RGB cable management and setup. So just a convenient bonus feature of that. With those both removed, basically we've got a couple thumb screws at the back here. Oh, they also want you to remove the hard drive cage if you want to swap the orientation of the power supply to keep the power supply on the bottom even after the chassis is flipped. There are 4 screws that hold this cage in place. By the way, did you notice these hard drive cages have fan mounts on them? You can mount, I believe, 80mm fans, a couple on that side or on that side. So if you are mounting drives in here, especially the high RPM ones that get hot, you can do active cooling over those. Nice. From there, you just push the case forward on the base plate, lift it off, and then do the thing that I forgot to do, which was undo all the front panel cable management and then feed it through so this will come off cleanly. Just a moment. Do note that the magnetic dust filter on the bottom can sort of shift and just slide it over like that, or slide it up like that. Again, depending on the orientation of the case, which will now be that way. Wait, no, that way. There we go. Then we just shift it back like that. Resecure these thumb screws here. And there you have it. It's a reverse orientation now with the motherboard flipped. So the I/O is on the bottom and the PCI expansion slots are going to be up on the top. Shouldn't have secured that. This is my first time doing this, which is why I keep forgetting steps. But one thing you might want to do before you reinstall that bottom piece is reposition the power supply support bracket, which is right here. I don't think you can access the 2 screws for that unless that bottom piece is removed. And again, this is just the bracket that the power supply sits on, so we're popping it off the top and installing it down on the bottom. So just FYI, here's the power supply bracket, and here is how it is installed by default. 2 screws through the top that you remove. And then I popped it off and I flipped it over and I brought it down here and I was like, wait, there's no mounting holes for that, but that's because this actually needs to be flipped like that, because the power supply sits up just a little bit higher when the case is flipped because there's a grommet back there for passing stuff through, which, by the way, I think is partially there so you can feed through stuff like an HDMI cable or video outs for the graphics card if you go with the GPU upright orientation that I already showed you. Just a couple screws from the bottom here to install this. And now a power supply sitting on top of that should be at the proper height to align with the rear power supply bracket at the back. Also, Lian includes some rubber pads, again, just to provide some noise dampening, vibration dampening, so you can position that right on there. And the reason that they don't pre-install these is because the case is so flexible and you can flip it over. If you're going with that original upright orientation, you'd want to put the pad on that side. If you flip it this way, which is the way I'm going to be building, you'll want to put the pad like that. Likewise, for this 2.5-inch drive mount solution at the back here, which I had removed to do that flippy thing, this is actually where the De Bauer logo can go on there. And again, the reason this doesn't come pre-installed is if you flip the case, it would be upside down. So wait until you decide which orientation you want to use, and then you can stick that on so it will be upright. And there it is, guys, the 180-degree rotation flipped orientation for the Lian O11 EVO. the newest case in the Lian Li O11 lineup, developed in collaboration with their Bauer. Just want to say thank you to everyone for stopping by and checking out this video. Like I said, I have a full build planned for this case. That's going to be coming out sometime next week because I'm still waiting on a few choice components to arrive for it, but it's going to be super epic. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. I'll post links to the case as well as other relevant links down in the video's description, so check those out, including a link to my store at paulshardware.net where you can check out shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other high quality merchandise if you want to help support me and get yourself some high quality merchandise. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.